Welcome back to another edition of the Wolverine.com podcast. My name is Chris Balas. With me, Doug Skene. We've missed you, Skene. Michigan's former All Big Ten offensive lineman. First things first, Skene. Cheers to 2022 resolutions you can actually keep. I'm off to a bad start. How about having clean and shiny balls all year round? Our sponsors at Manscaped are here to save your balls this year, Skene, and everybody else, and make the ball drop into 2022. The ball drop into 2022, the cleanest and sexiest ever. Set your first New Year's resolution with good intentions and join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use, I think it's, what is it, Clay? Go Blue 20? Blue 20?
20 Go Blue.
20 Go Blue, damn it, for 20% off and free shipping. So I'm going to use Manscaped on my hair. You know, Skene, I came into this podcast. I've had the Rona. I think I told you. So I've been down and out for about 2 weeks now. And I did tell, I knew I was going to get crap from Chris Stapleton about this mop of hair on my head. So like you said, maybe I'll use those manscaping tools on my hair because I haven't had a chance to get a haircut. So this is your former teammate and punter. Who used to wear a mullet.
Yeah, he and I text throughout the season. Yep.
Yeah. And this guy used to freaking have a mullet, and here he is ripping about me on my hair because now he's a pretty boy, and because he did some acting in Hollywood. You know, the guy, by the way, he's a pretty talented actor, I have to admit. So unfortunately,
we're not on Stapleton's level.
No. And he's a pretty good guy. Anyway, Skene, let's talk a little bit about first things first, the Jim Harbaugh rumors. And we were talking off the air here for a minute and about the changing landscape of college football. And Bill Parcells once said something to you, your coach at New England, and he said, every team is different. I don't care how many of you are back. If we have 90% of our guys here, it's different. The NFL is different than college football. Maybe it's not as much anymore. And the trend is that the college football is becoming more and more like the NFL.
Yeah, that was 1993 or 4 when I was in New England there, and we had a team meeting, and Bill Parcells was talking to the team. It was an off-season. It was one of those off-season, meetings there, and the point that you described there was absolutely valid, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Certainly in the NFL more than it did in college, but I think it applied to college back then. Certainly more now. Whatever your team is this year, championship, no championship, it doesn't matter the sport. Next year's team will be different. The chemistry is different. The roster is going to be maybe slightly different or very different. Doesn't matter. But each and every season is of its own self. And what you did last year does not automatically mean you're going to have success next year. And what you say you're going to do next year has nothing to do with this year. And that was the point that Coach Parcells made. It really stuck with me. As I look back on my career and through all the way back through high school, I can think about, that is so true that those teams were so different. And while at Michigan, we had a lot of success, and each one of those teams was a championship team, but they were very different. And so now flash forward to where we are today in college football with all the changes in the transfer portal and the NFL pressures and the NIL money now. This Michigan team that we just watched this last season win the Big Ten, beat Ohio State, do all those things. Obviously, got crushed in the playoff game there. But that team that we see this fall show up in Ann Arbor could look absolutely, totally night and day different, roster-wise and coaching-wise, from what we just watched. And that may be the new standard in college football because of all the possibilities of movement that's going on.
Yeah, I hate to sound like the old guy, get off my lawn type, but man, I miss it. You knew that in the early 1990s that, maybe a guy would get an opportunity and move on. Bo Schembechler certainly had several assistants do it, but he would plug the new guys in, and they were very similar to the old guys, and the culture didn't change. And that's the big thing about this, right, is that the culture, ideally, the culture remains the same, and it's easier said than done in this day and age because you don't know who's going to be here and who's not. To me, the culture, he fixed it in a year ahead of schedule, Jim Harbaugh, and I give him credit for that. Brought in some good, young, talented coaches, Steve Klinkscale, Ron Bellamy, Mike Hart, right down the list. Promoted Sharon Moore, did a great job on the offensive line. but you need to replicate that. It's not a one-year deal in college football. It makes their job harder now. If assuming Jim Harbaugh stays and he's still flirting with the NFL, and part of me believes that Harbaugh understands that the challenge now is a lot different than it was 15 years ago, then assuming he does come back, that's a big challenge for him.
Well, Balas, I think Jim Harbaugh and the rest of college coaches understand how fast things are changing now with the NIL and the transfer deal. And again, all the coaches that you just listed off did a really great job last year and creating a team to win a Big Ten championship. That was great. It feels like that culture that was built has now across college football has shattered as guys can transfer whenever they feel like and go play wherever they want, no questions asked. And the money that is now influencing roster changes with the NIL influence in some of the teams that have openly, publicly talked about $25 to $30 million budgets to go build a freshman class. I think that was Texas A&M. If I'm Jim Harbaugh or if I'm Ryan Day or I'm any college coach, I'm looking around going, how in the world do I keep up with this, knowing that I have no control over my roster other than to make it as attractive as possible to stay here, but I have no contractual obligation to for my players to stay here. They can transfer whenever they want. And so that feeling, boy, if like I said, if I'm Jim Harbaugh or Ryan Day or Kirby Smart or any of these coaches and the NFL comes calling where they do have roster management regulations and rules and free agency and the draft, and it's very, very strict, I'm giving a hard look and I'm giving a listen to the NFL, because at least there, I know there's some certainty that I'm going to be on an equal playing field with the rest of my competitors. And I know it's a cynical way to look at it, but I think it's a real way to look at it, Balas, that these are the realities now of college football. And if you're one of the teams on the outside looking in, you don't have a $30 million budget to go recruit a freshman class, I'm not sure that I would want to play that game either, knowing that it's not a level playing field.
Yeah, A, and B, when you're trying to level the playing field with things like satellite camps, and there've been back and forth about how effective that was or would be, and then the NCAA comes down on you for that and makes that disappear, even though they're turning a blind eye to all of the debauchery going on in college football. I don't think it's cynical. I think you're being realist about how the deck is stacked against these teams, other than the top 2, 3, 4 that are willing to play the game. Now, it has leveled out a little bit with NIL, but at the same time, NIL was not supposed to be that recruiting tool where you're promising kids so and so much and so forth to come to your school, but that's exactly what it's become.
That is exactly what has happened, Balas.
Yep.
There are it's a whole industry now, because the money now is part of the offer, and guys are transferring all over the place with the allure that so and so is going to have money. And let's just say, Balas, let's say you're an all Big Ten, maybe an All-American safety at Indiana. Let's just make that up, right? And you're a junior or you're a sophomore, and you're a guy that ended up there, maybe Michigan or Ohio State or whoever didn't give you an offer, and you ended up in Indiana, but you're a superstar now, and you got a couple of years left. You're telling me the NCAA is going to have some magical powers to keep, I don't know, a team from the South contacting your people, let's just say your parents, your uncle, whoever it is, and say, hey, you got 2 years left of eligibility. Hey, no offense, but you're at Indiana. You're an All-American. How about you come down to our school where we'll pay you $1 million a year for your last 2 years and maybe some more. How you feel about that? And of course, that doesn't go direct to the player or through anybody in the school, because that would be official NCAA tampering. But I don't think for a second that that's not already going on. And that's the dark side of the NIL and the transfer portal and the way it works today in college football. And I believe you're going to see this.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
We're already seeing it.
We are already seeing it. It's funny. I was talking to Sean Morris from the Big Ten Network. He works on the basketball side of things, Northwestern grad, and he said, the day's coming when halfway through a season, a team understands that they need a point guard to compete for a national championship, and they're going to challenge and say, look, this kid wants to transfer halfway through the season. Why should we punish him for, wanting to go somewhere else where he's got a better opportunity? And you start poaching kids from teams in the middle of the year. He said, how far are we from that? And,
Yeah.
people can laugh and scoff and say that'll never happen. There have been things that are happening in college football that I never thought would happen.
Well,
And
and here's another example of that, Balas. So without tampering, right? How does a coach signal to that point guard, I want you on my team, without calling the player, because that's against the NCAA rules? Well, here's what you do. You go onto that kid's Twitter profile or his Instagram profile, and you just follow him.
yeah,
And again, if I'm the All-American safety at Indiana, or I'm the point guard at whatever school, and all of a sudden I look at my social media, and the head coach of the head coach of a national championship contending school is suddenly following me. I wonder why he's doing that. Well, and that's
right,
not against the rules. If
right,
I'm a coach in a team that has $50 million in NIL money to go get a team, and I just decide I'm going to follow Chris Balas from a safety from Indiana, boy, this is how this is happening today. This is happening.
yeah,
And
yep,
so there's your signal. Boy, I guess I should get a hold of somebody down at XYZ school.
right.
And boy, again, how does this revert back to Michigan? Again, with the situation with Coach Harbaugh, and I say beyond that, any talented coach that's looking or maybe getting an opportunity in the NFL, I'm giving a hard look to that, saying, this is crazy.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You're fighting a losing battle, is the way I look at it. And not to sound like a defeatist, and we've seen that he can still win championships, but to say, okay, this is where you are. We're going to tie two hands behind your back, and maybe put a brick on your feet and throw you in the water. And good luck, have fun.
Well,
Good.
I think that's one way to look at it, Ballas. But the other way is Michigan's going to play this NIL thing, and they're going to,
Yeah.
do their part to compete in the transfer portal as well. But what I'm simply saying, and I talked about this before, the team in Austin, Texas, and the team in College Station, Texas, those two schools in particular have more money to throw around and go buy a roster than I would guess any team in the country. And now there's really nothing stopping them from doing it. And so,
Right.
and not, again, not that Michigan or Michigan State or Ohio State's not going to play this game. They are. I just have a feeling, it's just my opinion, I have a feeling, having lived there for 8 years and still, being aware of what goes on down there, the passion and the culture and the amount of money in the state of Texas to win college football games is nothing like we see here in the Midwest.
Yeah, exactly. There's no question about it. And all you have to do is go to their message boards. Texas A&M and Texas are always right up there. It's a religion. Saturday's the holy day of obligation, as Bob Ufer used to say down there. It is literally nuts. And so, all right, let's start talking about this team for next year. It's going to look entirely different. And we were just talking about different rosters and everything else. And there are assumptions that you make when you look at a roster, which is kind of, it's funny because I date myself, but I go back to 1985 versus 1986 and the defense in 1985 and how good they were. Not the most talented group, but an unbelievable group that played so well together. Lost maybe one guy or two guys, and the entire defense was different in 1986. So that's something you have to caution yourself and say, just because you have so and so many returning starters, it's going to be the same. However, we look at this offensive line, and they've got some key pieces coming back: Ryan Hayes, Trevor Keegan, Zach Zinter. You lose Andrew Stuber and Andrew Vistardis, who are huge pieces. Everybody assumes, because you've got this All-American coming in, Oluwatimi from Virginia at center, and Carson Barnhart, a guy who has played, that this thing's not going to fade at all. What's the danger in that assumption, A? And B, how different is it when you plug in a new center? This is a guy who, by all accounts, I think he was third in the Remington voting for nation's best center, but it's a different dynamic, right? And you just really don't know what you're going to get.
Well, the things you listed off there are all the positives, right? So the returning players, and there's a culture inside that offensive line meeting room that already exists. The
Yep.
question will be for this young man coming over and coming into the program, how will he adapt? And it really comes down to a personal chemistry thing. And I obviously have no idea about this young man, but he comes in with a humble heart and an eagerness to fit in and learn, and I think things will be fine. and I mean off the field, in the meeting room, in the locker room, around town with his teammates, the social side of things. And as long as that falls into place, the football will fall into place afterwards. What you hope is that's exactly what happens, because the opposite, the guy comes in, I'm all that in a bag of chips and I'm an All-American and you're not. That'll be a disaster. And I'm not saying that would happen. I have no
No.
idea. But I think physically you can watch him play and you go, wow, all right, this kid's got the size, he's got the athleticism. Clearly, he's pretty doggone good. So as long as we can fit in the Michigan culture and the Michigan social vibe that exists within that building and around town, everything should be fine. The difference is like changing any offensive lineman. When you play center, guard, tackle, you get so used to that guy you're playing next to, the habits, the vocalizations, what you're really hearing, the pace at which things work, and you just get a feel for each other working together in that offensive line. And whether you're replacing Vastardis or Stuber or whoever it is, just like all the decades before, it just takes time and reps. And then, you just sort of get used to each other. And that will have to happen with this young man coming in to play center. And it's going to have to happen over there with Barnhart or whoever else replaces Stuber at right tackle. And so it's a natural process, Balas, and it usually takes about one off season and one spring. And by the end of fall, when you're ready to play that first game, you should be ready to go and iron all those things out. And it's not as daunting as you think it is, as long as the personality stuff falls in place.
Right. And the longer you play together, the more you guys get to understand your tendencies and everything else. And so,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that you've always talked about is 3 years together, when Steve Everett's in there, going to the bathroom or something like that, or needs to, or what he's doing or what he's thinking on the field. So,
You do. You get to know each other so well. You just kind of,
yeah,
where he's going. You could close your eyes and plug your ears, and you could. I can tell you where he's going to be, and just to this day, I could, if Everett and I lined up today, and you called 51 slide left or whatever, I could, to this day, I can tell you I kind of know where he's going to be, and he's going to kind of know where I'm at. That just
right.
happens when you do things a couple million times together.
Yeah, yeah. We're going to get him on a podcast, by the way, and we'll have the censors ready. But we're going to get him on here in about 3 weeks. And man, we've done podcasts with him in the past, and it's been fantastic. So, you guys are great representatives. I do want to ask your opinion real quick again. And I know we've talked about last year's line and sure the job Sharon Moore did quite a bit. But what did you see different that from this year's line than maybe in some past? Because there's always been talent. I was watching John Runyon Jr. play with Green Bay out there dominating people, and he had he did, and he'd had a good career here. And you look at 4 or 5 guys there that are playing in the NFL. I thought this year's line was more connected and played better than any of those lines, frankly. And I'm not ripping on anybody or saying anything. I'm just making an observation here. What's the difference? Do you think it's just a group of guys that just played well together?
Yeah, well, clearly they played well together. We can look at
Yeah.
that. We can break down the pressures and the sacks and the amount of time that those quarterbacks had without pressure. And so, and the running game effectiveness and how they just physically got better in their own individual techniques. And Ed Warner, preceding Coach Moore, started this process, right? And so before Ed Warner, I thought that offensive line was kind of a hot mess. They looked uncertain. They had all kinds of statistical problems, giving up pressures. Ed Warner comes in, says, "I'm gonna simplify things," which clearly they did. And yet, there's still, obviously, Coach Harbaugh made a change there, and we all had questions, myself included. But Coach Moore took them to the next level. Now, part of that is obviously Coach Moore's ability to influence these young men to get better. The other part is you got a guy like Vastardis, who was a veteran, and Stuber, a veteran, and other guys that had experience in there, and a nice mix of young guys trying to get on that field. That magical potion came together. Every unit in the football program has to have a couple leaders in their individual room. And so you could say last year in the offensive line, clearly Vastardis was one of those guys, and Stuber probably another one, Hayes at left tackle, and then you have the young guys coming on. And so that had a massive impact on their ability to get better throughout the course of the season. And so, but again, the credit goes to Coach Moore because he's the head offensive line coach who organizes that unit. So I have a hard time describing it other than to say whatever was going on off the television cameras, Balas, on game day, whatever was going on in that locker room that prevented that previous group of offensive linemen that are all playing in the NFL and playing really well from performing as well as this one. I really have a hard time describing it, although I will tell you this. The effectiveness of the quarterback play absolutely has a impact on how well an offensive line looks. The quarterback play that Michigan had last year of not forcing the ball, not hanging on to it too long, getting rid of it and living for another down, those things absolutely create positive performances for an offensive line. And the previous quarterback before McNamara struggled in that department a little bit. So we just didn't have the effective quarterback play that we needed. And that, I'm not killing on Joe Moulton here.
Milton.
And Patterson before him, Joe Milton. It just is what it is. So to have a great offensive line, you can watch it in the NFL playoffs today. You want to have a great offensive line, you need to have a really good quarterback behind them that can make that offensive line look better.
And it looks like Michigan's got two, and that'll be interesting too. Are you as interested as I am to see how that plays out? Before we get there, I got to bring up the Manscaped. Did we get you a Manscaped kit yet? Have you seen one arrive on your door?
Although I did just cut my hair the other day, so
okay,
I don't have much to.
You could probably use the lawnmower 4.0 to cut your hair, but we're gonna, if you want to cut cartoon shapes into your other, the hair on the, you need these special tools. So we'll get you hooked up. That's exactly what I'm gonna do here when we're done. Too much information, I know, but Woody Woodpecker or something, So anyway, I forgot where I was going with this, but
we were talking about the offensive line. We were talking about next year, and earlier in this
the quarterbacks.
Alex, you had mentioned, next year's team is going to look so much different. It will, more defensively than offensively, but offensively, boy, we're going to have a lot of talented guys back on this offense, and we're going to lose quarterbacks. Quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, both tight ends, all three tight ends.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of positive things to say. Look at all this we got coming back. Again, someone else is going to have to lead over there. Whoever was leading is going to have to lead even better. I would expect that to happen. Offensively, there's a lot to be excited about. It's the defensive side of the ball where I go, ooh, yeah, yikes. How do you replace Hutch and Ajabo and Hinton in the middle and Ross and Dax Hill? And that defense is going to be challenged for all these young men to say, I'm going to be the next dude to step up and meet expectations because I want to have the same kind of season that they did, and I want to go have the NFL opportunities that they are getting. So it's time to step up and play. And for us fans, we go, all right, who's it going to be?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting at quarterback. How do you feel about a platoon? Because I'm thinking, man, that's where we're headed in game one. Maybe for the non-conference portion of and maybe that's the right thing to do to see how these guys do. I understand it's not ideal.
I don't think it's ideal. I've always said that, and I've watched this throughout college football. But if Jim Harbaugh or whoever the head coach is at that time wants to keep both on his roster, he's going to have to play both because one will hit the transfer portal and go get some NIL money to go lead some other team somewhere else. There's nothing stopping that from happening other than the player himself. And so I think it's just going to be the way it is. And I think, part of the reason last year in that defense, you saw so many substitutions on and off the field. Obviously, McDonald's defensive packages and his schemes called for it. But when you involve 20, 30 guys in a regular playing rotation, suddenly they all feel like starters. They all feel like they have a heavy hand in the outcome of the game. And instead of 11, 12, 15 guys playing an entire game, you double that. Now you've eliminated 15, maybe 20 guys from looking at the NCAA transfer portal because you're not playing enough. I think this is a trend you're going to see throughout college football for coaching staffs to try to get more guys on the field more often so they can retain their rosters.
Yeah, I think you're right. We're going to let you go here. I do want, for the young guys, Woody Woodpecker is a cartoon character. And if Skene, I bought a pin in 1982, I think, or no, it was 1979, that said Woody is a pecker. And I got it at Michigan Stadium. Can you imagine that happening today? It's like, still have it downstairs in my office. So very interesting stuff. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I can imagine you outside the stadium selling these T-shirts, Balas, and you
probably
probably
wasn't
sell
a
a lot
t-shirt.
of them. I do think that most Americans still have a pretty good sense of humor, and
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot of people that want to eliminate that kind of thing. But I still think a lot of people would look at that, especially those folks our age, and say, "Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
funny."
It was. I thought it was funny, so that's why I bought it
It is
when
funny.
I was 10 years old. So sorry, Mom. Anyways, Doug Skene, Michigan's former All Big Ten offensive lineman. Skene, I appreciate your time as always, folks. Go to Manscaped 20 Go Blue to get your tools, and I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. Skene will get your package in the mail. So appreciate you being here. We'll get you on in a couple of weeks, hopefully with Steve Everett and a couple other your teammates. Man, I got a list here, buddy. I want to know
All
what Joe
right.
Kakuza's up to. I want to talk about his bear hunting expeditions and everything else. And
Oh yeah.
so we got a list of guys.
All right, we'll do that. That'll be fun this off season. So once again, thanks for having me. Go Blue.